Good evening. This is the introduction to a new journal, a new online journal that will deal with international affairs, both political and economic, and of course will also deal with national affairs. As, uh, as of today, there is no real boundary any longer between domestic affairs in any country and the international scene. We call it Beyond Geopolitics because we make a point with this name, not only because there is plenty of journals who already call themselves geopolitics or new geopolitics or radical geopolitics or critical geopolitics, but because we believe that there is a need to go beyond what is called today geopolitics. Geopolitics is an old name. Geopolitics is a kind of pseudoscience invented in the 19th century and which has been very popular for a period and has been responsible for several colonial conquests of European countries, or at least these conquests have been justified with geopolitical reasoning, and also during the 20th century has been involved with justification of territorial acquisitions and military aggressions among from European countries to other European countries. The most notorious brainchild of geopolitical thinkers is the infamous Lebensraum theory, on the basis of which Germany thought it could expand all over Central and Europe and parts also of Western Europe. Geopolitics has become very unpopular after World War II, but has a kind of revival after the end of communism in the last 20 years of the 20th century, of the last century. There is a reason for that, but we believe that we have to go beyond that. We'll explain. The main reason why geopolitics reappeared at the end of the 20th century is that Marxism became very unpopular and became discredited. Marxism is a theory of historical determinism that explains that there are historical forces at play that lead to certain conclusions, to certain events, and human beings, people, and social forces only can have an impact if they play into this mainstream of history, where history they march along the path of history. Historical determinists tend to entrust the future to say that the future is predetermined and there is no real freedom of individuals and societies and groups of men to alter the path of history. Of course, this theory was proven false. With the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Soviet Empire, and suddenly at that point, geopolitics reappeared. Geopolitics reappeared because many people found too hard, too difficult to accept the idea that what happens in the world, what happens to the human gender, what happens in history is the result of the deliberate and free action of individuals and groups of individuals and societies. The weight of responsibility, in a way, has been felt as being too heavy, to the burden of freedom of action, of not having rails along which the human society could go forward. We don't think that there is an historical determinism. We believe that human beings are free. Of course, they make mistakes, but they're free of making mistakes and of doing correct actions as well. Of course, this applies to single human beings, but also and mainly to groups of human beings, and especially to those very strong groups that are nations. Today they are felt as being less strong than they were in the past, but still they are very strongly felt by the individuals, and many individuals tend to behave according to what they consider to be the national interest, their collective interest. There are other groups, of course, groups of interest, groups such as social classes. There are tribal groups. We have seen them in action, for instance, in the Yugoslav wars, where these so-called nations were actually tribes and behaved like tribes and made war like tribal war. There are religions, of course. There are faiths and there are sects. There are religious movements, religion-based fundamentalisms. There are many criteria according to which men gather and tend to conduct a collective action for a name that is considered to be in the interest of that community. But all this enters into the sphere of the freedom of the rational choice of people and the free choice of people. And of course, all this is based on ideas, on theories, on ideologies, on philosophies of history, and on visions of the interest of the human gender as a whole and or parts of it. Geopolitics in this situation offered an easy alternative to what Marxism had been. It's very naive, and the assumption that everything is based on geographical features is, has been always been false, but is even more false now than in the past, when bombers or rockets can easily hit either the center of a big landmass state or maritime states, when broadcasts by satellite can reach any point in the world, when migrants do not move from, even when they move from one country to the other, they are not completely uprooted because their preferred TV programs follow them where they go to work, and they can easily keep in touch with their families by internet or by telephone, also because the cost of telecommunications has gone down dramatically. So basically, the idea that there is a geographical determinism, what groups of men, and especially countries, have to do is naive today, and is being and becomes more and more naive every day. Just to take an example, a looming conflict seems to be the conflict between Iran and Israel and its Western allies, or against America and its Israeli allies. The reasoning of which is seems to be behind the alleged intention of the Iranians to take hold of the atomic bomb or atomic weapons, is that they have to protect themselves against the little Satan and the big Satan. That's the United States and its allies in the Middle East. Now, if you try to find a geopolitical reason why Iran has to be an enemy of America, or even why Iran has to be an enemy of Israel, it would be difficult to find. Iran perceives itself as the center and the most important country in this Shia world. Now, this Shia world is made of countries where there are a majority of Shias, or in countries where there are minority and oppressed minorities of Shias. So you can justify with geo-religious reasons the aspiration by the Iranians to have an influence in countries like Syria, for instance, or in countries like Iraq, where there is an important Shia majority that has been ruled by a Sunni minority for several decades. In Azerbaijan, for instance, Azerbaijan, there is a similar situation where a huge Shia community is out of power, basically, or in the small states, small states in the Persian Gulf, and even in Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia, although the Shia are a minority, they happen to be the minority which is geographically installed on the resources in the very area in which the oil resources of Saudi Arabia are located. So you can find reasons for alliances or influence or hostility between Iran and a number of states, but Israel doesn't appear. There is no geographical or geopolitical basis to justify an Israeli Iranian or Iranian-Israeli hostility. But of course, we're not blind. We see that this hostility exists, but this has more to do with the fact that Israel was very good terms with Iran before the Islamic Revolution, when Iran was, of course, an Islamic country at the time, but was ruled by a regime that attempted to be more secular. And the Americans were the best ally of that regime. During this domestic upheaval that brought down the Shah and brought about the Islamic Republic, the American diplomats and the American government behaved in a way that the new regime perceives as hostile, very favorable to the Shah, and also in previous occasions this friendship to the Shah regime had been shown on the side of the Americans. So it's more the past, it's more the history and the geography that pits Iran against the US, what they call the big Satan. And conversely, Israel being the most powerful and most important ally and most reliable ally of the US in the Middle East, this hostility extends to Israel as well. On the other side, Israel feels menaced because of this hostility, and being weaker, being smaller, and being menaced by a rhetoric which is irresponsible on the side of the Israeli, of course, develops a hostile attitude, which